Mr. Greg DeSimone, how are you?
Great. How are you, Dom?
I'm good. I'm good. Over there in Boston.
Yes, in Boston. We say it normal, unlike you. But
No, I say it. I say it like I think you say it. That's what I do. Boston. I was there just before COVID broke out. I think you might have seen that video of me crossing the finish line at the marathon.
I did see that video. You looked like you had fun.
That's
Or
what
you're
the,
dead tired. I don't know how far you actually ran before you crossed the line.
Oh no, I just had my buddy take a video of me crossing the painted line on the road. I didn't actually run the marathon. Greg, you know me. I'm made to lift heavy things, not run distances.
You and me both.
Hey, Greg, thanks for joining me on the podcast here. This is, as you know, the Profit Tool Belt podcast. And we're talking to an audience that you're very familiar with. You're actually part of the audience in an interesting way. But it's all business owners in the construction space. It doesn't matter what space in construction, but they're all trades professionals, construction and contracting professionals who listen to the show to really get the kind of business ownership advice you and I are used to working in the world of. So let me ask you this, Greg. Who the heck are you? Why are you talking to this group?
Well, I'm a friend of yours. That's how I think I'm on the show. So I met you, and we became friends and colleagues like 11 years ago, working together in a coaching organization. Actually, you were one of my mentors as I grew my coaching and consulting practice. During my time with that coaching organization, I took on a role of director of finance, which I supported the coaches with financial literacy and helping their clients work through their metrics. And I also provided benchmarking tools and reports for the coaches and their clients over time. In the last 4 years, I've kind of morphed my coaching consulting practice I merged it with a M&A firm because
Right.
I was helping clients. Most of my practice was focused on succession and exit planning. And I found that my clients needed more and more help with the actual transaction at the end. And a couple of guys I used to refer work to were looking to expand, and my skill set and my background fit what they were trying to do. It also fit what I wanted to do with my business. So we kind of merged it together. So I do exit succession planning and a lot of transactional work where we actually help sell businesses.
Let me stop there for a second because some guys have never heard these words. Succession planning, exit planning. It's normal conversation for you and I.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean?
Well, succession planning is what's going to happen next with your business. How's it going to succeed into the future? And there's lots of options. A lot of times with smaller businesses, it could be a family succession. They have the kids that they want to transition it to. And a lot of the conversation starts with, do you have kids that want to take it over? Do you have kids that want to take it over, but are they ready to take it over?
Are they able? Yeah.
Are they able to take it over? And then it goes from, okay, if they're not, or you don't have that option, what are your other options? Do you have key management personnel that may want to buy or take it over? Or do you want to sell it for the most money on the market? And sometimes you may want to give it to your management team, but they don't have the risk mindset because being a business owner is risky. Some people are employees because they want to be employees, not because they want to be an owner. They could be an owner, but they don't have that risk mindset.
Right.
So you decide, like, do you have does your management team have the ability to take it over, the risk mindset to take it over? And can they give you the same value or a close enough value to make it worthwhile to give it to a management team versus selling it to the market? So we go through that whole process, like what's the right succession? What are the risks, pros and cons for each one? Based on what you decide, how do you put together the right plan to execute that plan over time?
Yeah. And I suppose that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is these comparative reports. This is, the reason that as you said, you and I've become friends through business over the years, but I noticed very early on in your coaching skill that you're very financially minded and very practical. I mean, you're a part owner in a cabinet shop, aren't you?
I am. I helped sell a high-end cabinet manufacturer. They did a lot of work in the Seaport district of Boston, which is, if you're in Vancouver, you're probably similar type of buildings. There's $2 million condos along the waterfront. And there's the 30-story, 40 stories high all along this waterfront where 10 years ago there was nothing. So this company focused on providing those high-end cabinets for a luxury residence model. So when we went to sell the business, I knew who the buyer was. By chance, the right buyer happened to be someone I was friendly with.
Yeah.
And asked if I wanted to take some of my proceeds from my commission from the transaction and roll it into the working capital for the running of the business. So I'm now a minority owner, very minority owner of a cabinet manufacturer.
No, but I think that's important, Greg, because the people listening to the show also have skin in the game, whatever trade, HVAC, plumbing, roofing, electrical, solar, slab jacking, whatever anybody does, they have skin in the game. So it's nice to know that you have that background. And what I was impressed with when I first met you is that you combined the financial part. You made it easy to understand, because so many times accountants, no offense, Greg, this has the potential.
I'm a recovering CPA. I've learned how to speak English.
Well, and that's the compliment I'm trying to give you here, is that you actually make it easier to understand, which is why I asked you to run the finance division of the other company. But so we've talked about what succession planning is, so that everybody understands. We've talked about exit a little bit. You can choose who to sell to if you build the business correctly. And not everybody on listening is thinking about selling the business, but I have to be the one to break the bad news. At some point, somebody's going to have to take over this business. It could be 50 years from now, 60 years from now, 3 years from now.
Or it just goes under and you lose all the value and capital that you put into the business over time.
Yeah.
Which happens way too often. The smart business owners think about what they end in mind, and they don't have one specific end. They have options. I use the phrase with my clients is prepare a transferable business, which means it's ready to be transferred at any time. Doesn't mean you have to transfer it. You don't have to give it to your kids. You don't have to sell it. But the prime example is, and actually I know this from my dad's company. My dad ran a millwork distributing company. It was pretty successful by all means. It's a small one, but it was successful, and he bought it in the 80s. Right before the housing boom in New England, was able to pay off a 10-year note in 2.5 years.
Gee.
About 5 years later, a Canadian company, or maybe 10 years later, a Canadian company was looking to get into the New England market and made him a sweetheart offer. My dad turned it down, saying, "No, I'm going to hand this off to my son, not me, my younger brother who worked in it." Looking back, that was a sweetheart offer that he would never see again. I mean, it was just such a high multiple. It was worth way more than the business was worth at the time. It's worth way more than it was worth when he decided to close it down.
Yeah.
The problem was he wasn't thinking about having a transferable business. He had one thing in his mind and not saying, "Hey, I want to be able to evaluate any option." I mean, he didn't even know what his business is worth. He didn't know that, I'm going to use round numbers here not to give away any trade family secrets.
Yeah.
The offer is like $5 million. The business might have been worth 2.5, and that's roughly the variation. He didn't know he was getting 2 times what his business was worth at the time. He just said, "No, I want to run it and give it to my kids." And he was like probably 58, 60 years old, saying, "No, I could probably run it for a few more years." Not thinking, not thinking, "Hey, is it better to give my son a legacy and a business to run and a job?" Because that's how my brother took that as a job. Or do I get a big pile of cash and put it in the family estate and help my kids by distributing cash to them and maybe funding other business opportunities in the future? He didn't look at it though. He just like, "Hey, I'm giving it to my kid."
Yeah. And for anybody listening, this is something that both Greg and I are experts in. If anybody wants, on my website, I've got a document called the 3 types of buyers, which is what Greg's talking about here. There's different kinds of buyers in the market. There's really only 3 of them. Somebody's going to pay you market value, fair market value. Somebody's going to pay you above market value, which is who your dad encountered. And then the other guy, this is a guy we usually don't like, the guy who's going to pay you below market value. But understanding how those different buyers look in the market, so you can see them when they walk through the door, when they phone you, and they send you an email, it makes such a big difference. And I kind of wish your dad had that or been able to speak to you. At the time, you didn't have the experience you have now. But anyways, if anybody wants it, contact me. You guys all know how to get in touch with me, and I'll send you that report, the 3 types of buyers. So, Greg, you mentioned something interesting here, and I'm going to take this opportunity on this call, this interview, to ask you a couple of questions people may not have heard before. You used the word multiple when you talked about the value of that business, that trades distribution business. What's a multiple?
Okay, that's a good question. it's a simple way to boil down what a business is worth. When you look, there's a lot of financial crap that goes into building multiple. It's like, what is your rate of return, your internal rate of return, how much you're going to invest, how much you're going to get back, and you can make it all crazy. A multiple boils that down to a very simple calculation. What number times your income, or what number times your revenue is your business worth? So a multiple is, I'm going to take your net income, or we use the term EBITDA, earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization, which is a
business
proxy for income.
Yeah.
And if you want, I can explain why we use that versus something else. But it's multiples taking how much a business is worth times your income number or your revenue number. And those are usually two of the primary multiple metrics that use a multiple against: revenue multiple or an EBITDA multiple, occasionally gross profit.
Yeah. So it's when I'm going to buy, Greg, let's say I'm going to buy your business. I'm the buyer. Mm-hmm. I'd like everybody on the show to understand, I'm buying your cash flow. I'm treating your business like an ATM. I'm going to, even better than that. I want to put money in and I expect my money out. Right. So if I'm going to pay you 1 times earnings, just as an example to make it easy math, or 1 times multiple, and you made $60,000 last year, I'm going to pay you $60,000, but I expect that the next year and the year after that, I'm going to make another 60 and another 60. And then because I'm so smart and I listen to this show, I'm going to increase it from 60 to 80 to 100, 120, et cetera. Right.
It's a great point. On multiples, when you go to sell your business to it, the multiple is, let's use in the trades industry, depending on your trades and how big you are and what your growth rates are, there's all sorts of different factors. So there's not one number for your industry. It's very customized to your business. But the range might be 2.5 to 5 times your income. And it will change from year to year depending how the construction market is.
Yeah.
If your income is, I'm going to use round numbers because I can do math quickly that way. If you have $1 million EBITDA, and your multiple is 2.5, you're going to get 2.5 million.
Right.
Now, if you say, I want my business to be worth more, so I want it to be worth 5. Well, Evan says, okay, I got to grow my business from 1 million in EBITDA to 2 million. Well, that's not necessarily true. If you run your business more efficiently and you find ways to reduce risk and have growth, you may only have to grow to like 1.2 million or 1.5 million because your multiple won't stay at 2. If your business eliminates risk for the buyer and gives them more potential to get a return, they'll pay a higher multiple. I mean, they do all these calculations, but they express it in, I will pay you 2.5x times your income. I will pay you 3 times your income. So you don't necessarily have to go from 1 million to 2 million to get to 5 million. You can get to 1.5 million times 3.3x because you have a growth model now. Your margins went from 35% to 40%. You now have a layer of management that you can walk away and the business can run by itself. There's all kinds of risk factors that present themselves. And if you can eliminate those and make it more comfortable for someone to step in and take your role or take their ownership role, the better. And this is where it works too with your internal management team, because most employees, like, they want to sell to the management. I've heard this so many. I want to sell to my management team. Then you go to ask the management team, hey, you ready to step up and buy this? One is they typically don't have the capital, but sometimes they do. Even if they do have the capital, they get squeamish because they're used to being an employee, and having to be an employee is you get your paycheck every single week. Being an owner, you have to worry about everything. And if things go up or down, you have to.
Sometimes you get a paycheck.
Sometimes you get a paycheck. Sometimes you don't. Yeah. Sometimes your vendors have to get paid so you can get supplies to go to the next one.
Yeah. And sometimes you get a big paycheck when you're running things right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Greg, this is a really good test question because I talk about this a lot on the show. If I want to increase the value of my business when I sell it, will any of these things help me get more than, how do I say this? More than fair market value. Let me ask you this. If I own my building, will I get more for the business or less for the business?
I'm going to say it's neutral, but it actually gives you options. Having options gives you opportunity to negotiate. The reason I love when someone owns their building is you can lease it. If they don't want to pay fair market value for the building, you can get fair market for the lease. It gives you options to attract different types of buyers, because some buyers absolutely want the building and other buyers don't. So if you can get people pitting themselves against each other,
Yeah.
it's better. And also, I'm not an expert on Canadian tax law, but in the United States, you can allocate portion price. Like you may say, I'm willing to pay $5 million for your business, 2.5 for your business, 2.5 for your real estate or your building.
Yeah.
So now that's how you came up with your offer. But you may go and talk to your tax guy and say, you know what, it would be better if the building was worth $4 million and the business was worth $1 million, or vice versa. Because if we do this, we can improve your after cash tax position. So one is you start with here's what your business, here's what the package is worth. Now let's allocate it and agree upon it so that we can get the best after tax.
Yeah.
Right. And when you have the building, it allows a lot of negotiating leeway, and sometimes you can find those little terms of where you might have a negotiating advantage because someone really wants something bad enough.
Yeah.
You can ask for something else somewhere else that gets you more money.
Yeah. I just did a strategic plan yesterday with a client, a new client that came on, because people that listen to the show sometimes call me and want to work with me. And so I just started with him.
That's shocking.
It just happens. It just happens, Greg. It's out of the blue. But one of the things that he said, and he's in a state that the real estate prices aren't all that high, but he specifically said in the meeting, he's so happy that he bought his building years ago. And he, hummed and hawed about whether he should do it. But what it allows him to do now is he can keep his overheads fixed because he's his own landlord. And if he was paying market rents, the way things have gone over the last 10 years, he'd have to be charging more. But he could stay competitive in the market because he bought the building and he's the landlord. Right. So he still pays. It's a separate company. The real estate holding is separate than the operations of his trades company.
Which is common.
Very common. But it's a sweet thing to do. And then, as you said, if you've got kids, and some of them don't want to take part in the company when you sell it, you can always make that real estate something that you make in your will or your legacy that goes on to pay family.
Well, which is a good point, Don, because my dad owned his real estate. So while his company, when he kind of stepped away and my brother didn't really step up, and we ended up liquidating his business, the one that he had the 2X offer like 15 years ago.
Yikes.
The good part is the real estate kept being worth more and more and more. So the real estate was actually worth more than the offer he got on the business 15 years before.
Oh, perfect.
And it happened to be because it's a hot area in Boston that used to be blue collar, and it used to be a place you wouldn't want to be other than if you had an industrial business.
Yeah, we've all got those towns.
And now it's a new spot where it's all being developed for condos because people want to be closer to Boston, but they can't afford downtown Boston or the seaport.
Yeah. But
they can be in the outskirts of Boston and just jump on the train and get into Boston real quickly, or drive down the expressway and be there in 10 minutes. So his property was worth 2-3 times as much as it was 15 years ago. So it sounds like a sob story with my dad, but because he had the real estate, it was a soft landing related to the overall business.
Yeah, and it didn't affect him. Psychologically, that can be a real hit. If you got an offer, again, let's just use the number you had said before, it was 10 million or something like that. And then you go and sell it in the future and you don't get that number, especially if you think you're trying to do what's great for your family and you bring them less of a number in the future, you think, I shoulda, coulda, woulda. You can always look in the past, but that soft landing allowed him to say, I still did it. I'm still the dad. I'm still whole.
Well, actually, you bring a point there. Can I don't mean to hijack here. I'm going to ask a question of myself that you didn't ask, but you may have asked soon.
Well done.
If you get the unsolicited offer, because someone gave you an unsolicited offer of 5 million, 10 million, that doesn't mean that's what your business is going to be worth forever. And it doesn't mean. So I would look at if you ever think you're going to sell the business, or you're going to transfer it to your kids through a gift and estate planning, understanding what your business is worth periodically is important. Knowing what your business is really worth and what it takes to make it worth more is important. So getting a market analysis or a valuation periodically helps you really understand where your business is, what it's worth, and how it fits into your overall plan. Because most business owners, other than their house, or actually this is probably a bigger asset than their house. So there's 2 big assets in your family: the business, the real estate related to the business, and your house. It doesn't make sense to know what your house is worth, to know what your real estate for your building is worth, but not know what your business is worth. Yeah. And trying to come up with a financial plan without knowing that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those are some of the things that you do and that we used to do together at the other, the other organization where you and I first met is comparative reports, benchmarking. And those are good to know for a number of reasons. I mean, there's reasons that are are sad but very human. Like if you have to split assets with your lovely wife, who's no longer your lovely wife, or insurance sometimes makes that requirement, or partnership. I know there are a number of partnership structures where you have to do some level of valuation annually so that the owners both know what the level set expectation is on what the future of the company is. What are you doing these days around giving people those kinds of reports so they have that insight?
Well, I used a couple different points. One is I talked about evaluation, which is really a comprehensive look at your business, which is probably the more expensive and doesn't need to be done as often, but it should be done periodically, every 5 years or so. But then there's the benchmark reports, and there's different levels. And the one you keep bringing up is the comparative benchmark report. And that's a report we have that is, we have access to a database for every industry through North America, well, Canada and the United States, I should say. Mexico's not in this. And it basically says, okay, in this industry, how does the average company in that industry perform? From working capital numbers like AR, days outstanding, inventory days outstanding, what's your gross margin, net income, maybe even specific to your industry might be what's your direct materials cost versus your direct labor cost versus your rent per subcontractor, revenue per subcontractor. So depending on your industry, there may be more and more industry specific metrics. What this report does is it helps level set where you are. A lot of people think they're doing well or they think they're not doing well, but they really don't know. They're guessing because they're hearing stories from people, whether it's at the golf course or at the soccer field or at the bar. Who knows where you're hearing the information, but you're hearing information. And just because someone says it doesn't make that the industry average. And I remember at a golf course and I hear people talk all the time and they brag about how great this business is and how great that business is. And I can go back and I look at the database and I'm like, sitting myself, their business isn't as good as I think it is. It's fine. It's paying their bills and they got a nice house, but it's relative to the peers. It's not doing as well. And if their goal is to be better, at least on level with the peers or better, they don't know that and they're not working at it. They think they're doing great because they get a good paycheck. So this allows you to say, am I doing worse or better? And know for sure. Now, if you're doing worse, you now have a roadmap of where am I behind? And I can, like, for example, I told you a story a while ago, Dom, about an HVAC company I worked with.
Yeah.
They were looking to grow. He said this guy needed to improve his bottom line by $200,000. That would solve all his problems. He was a $4 million HVAC company. They did a lot of installation and they were trying to do more service to get a recurring model.
Oh, I love that service and recurring model. That's a big bump for valuation, isn't it?
Yes, it is. The more more you have reoccurring and recurring revenue, the better. If it's under contract, even better. So this guy, he said, I need 200,000. So he wanted to talk about putting a marketing plan together, how to grow the top line so that he get his 5% bottom line to generate the 200,000. I'm sitting there going, okay, you're going to have to grow your business. I'm doing the math slowly here, but it would have to go to like about 5 or 6 million in revenue to get the 200,000 you needed. It would have to get to 6 million revenue to get the 200,000 you needed. And I said, when we went through the benchmark report, we're going through like, was he manage his working capital right? And then we went right to gross profit, gross margin percentage. The industry average was 35%. His company was at 30%. Well, that's a 5% difference where he was underperforming the market. 5% at 4 million is 200,000. I said, you don't have to grow. You just got to manage your margin.
Yeah.
I said, we can work on growth too. We can do both. But right now, you have the revenue to get the 200,000 you want. And interestingly, I said, I'm going to pick a name here. Jim. I said, hey, Jim, what do you price your projects at? And interestingly, he said 35%. I said, okay, so you're pricing it at market, but you're delivering it at 30%. Right. So we dug deep and said, okay, why is that? Is it your pricing model flawed? Are you missing costs?
Yeah.
Is your project tracking flawed where you're not tracking all the costs, or you have overages, but you're not managing it? Are you buying materials correctly? Are you having shrinkage that you're not accounting for? Are you accounting for overtime? Like if you're doing emergency work, are you like
Are you billing that
pricing it
appropriate?
at,
Yeah.
Are you pricing at your normal rate, but you're using OT hours? Are you using subcontractors because you don't have enough employees, so that you price it at your regular employee rate, but not your subcontractor rate?
Yeah.
So we went through those things, and I keep giving all these examples. There was like 10 different reasons why they were 5% below. And actually, when we went through them all, we actually improved from 30% to 40%. So we actually got a
even
$400,000
more.
improvement.
Isn't that crazy? Is that when you start to understand every business has profit leaks. They're just leaks. They're slow, oozing leaks. And the problem is there's so many of them quite often. And you see the same thing as me, Greg. A business owner doesn't know where to start. But you just got to find one and pick at it and fix it and move on to the next one and the next one. And those profit leaks, they add up so fast. One piece of rework, let's say you've got to send one man in one van out to do one piece of rework at one job. It's about $600. That's across all industries, very rough. But think about how many times your crew is doing rework because a piece was missed or an extra trip to the supplier to get something. And every time that happens, that comes out of your paycheck as the owner. And all you got to do is go back and find out where the system is flawed, because that's really a system problem, and fix it. Plug that hole. There's $600 for you every day of the year.
Yeah. Well, we found one with a roofing company where their direct materials costs. I mean, the direct labor, the projects with they had a great marketing program. They grow way too fast.
Yeah.
So they were subbing out work to other smaller roofing companies to fill in the gap. So we knew that their margins were going to be lower because the subcontractor labor rate was higher, because they had to get their profit versus paying our employees. But we noticed that the direct materials cost was also higher for the subcontractors. And what we found was, if you had 20 square on a roof, it was always priced bid out at 20 square, but they only needed 18, and the 2 square never came back to the warehouse. They went to the subcontractor's truck, and they used it on their own projects. So these subcontractors were taking 5-10% of the materials and using it on their own projects. So until we dug into this and we said, okay, why? Because they just looked at it first like, yeah, subcontractors, the margin's much smaller. We understand that because we're paying higher labor rates. But then we dug into the pieces, because we went through the benchmark report. We said, yeah, your direct materials is off too. Why is that? And they found there was shrinkage because they were funding their own inventory.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up that example in roofing, because the other example I've heard in roofing is where you have a price for dropping the material on the driveway and another price for getting that material delivered to the roof. You're going to pay for it either way. You're going to pay labor to get it up to the roof. But if you're not charging at the right rate, sometimes this comes up in insurance claims, right?
Yes.
But that money just disappears because it hasn't been accounted for. And I've always said, look, if you can afford to lose the money, you can afford to take the money as the owner. And that's what the game is about. Here is, we run a business so that we can take that money to put on our family's table for the Thanksgiving turkey or our Christmas tree or whatever it is. That's why we do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. This comparative report you talked about, how does that work? And well, let me start with this. How big do you have to be before that thing makes sense?
You don't have any size that works, because we can, particularly in the construction and trades, there's a lot of data in those industries. So we can parse it out by revenue size to make it meaningful. Like if you're a $1 million HVAC company with a guy and a couple contractors working for you, we're going to compare you to people that have a similar setup, and it's based on revenue size. We're not going to compare you to
Johnson Controls.
The HVAC, Johnson Controls was working on the high-end commercial products in the major cities. So we can narrow it down by revenue size, so the numbers are meaningful to you, and you're being compared to businesses that are similar size, which means they're probably similar structure. Doesn't mean they're exact same structure, and that may be reasons why you're not as successful. We'll dig into that once we see the gaps. But we can give you a reasonable approximation that you're not going to be compared to someone who has a completely different operating structure.
So just remind me, because I forgot, is this the report that you have access to because you're a CPA and you're part of that network that allows you to get all that info that CPAs only have access to?
Well, it's not because I'm a CPA, but because I'm a CPA, I gravitated towards this. It's a software package I have a subscription to. But to your point, The data is the reason I like this database that I use. It's from SageWorks, which was bought by someone, I can't remember their name, but it's SageWorks is the company.
Yeah.
The data it's third party data, which means if you get your tax return done or you're having a review for the bank, the CPAs will use this tool to do their analytical procedures to see if there's any gaps and there's anything that doesn't make sense before they sign off on the final numbers.
This is real info, Greg. It's not BS info. It's not milked info. No. This is straight from tax returns, bank reports.
It's third-party independent entered versus, say, like D&B, Dun & Bradstreet and Hoover's is another big independent database of financial information for private companies, which is a good database, but it's self-reported. So either some years you put the numbers in, some years you don't. Some years you put all the numbers in, some years you put all the numbers in.
Yeah.
Sometimes you put it in right from the internal statement. Sometimes you take your reviewed statements from the CPA. So it's not consistent. When it comes from this database that we use, it's always from a CPA who's doing as part of a review or a tax return. And to a lesser extent, banks who are underwriting loans. They say, okay, if I'm going to underwrite a loan and figure what the risk is, they're comparing you to other companies in the industry. So they'll use the same analytical procedures as part of the underwriting. So the CPA is doing analytical procedures for part of the reviews and tax returns. Banks doing analytical procedures for underwriting are the people supplying that data into the system. So it has a lot more integrity.
Yeah, it's real data.
It doesn't mean it's going to have every single piece of data that you may want. Like I want to look at it this way or that way. It's an industry average. So there's a lot of great data, but I can't tell you how many redheaded, left-handed, blue-eyed foremen do you have? Because they don't track that data. But there's lots of good, and you'd be surprised some of the data people ask me. Can you get me how many two-family houses that have solar but are not within that can't sell it back to the grid? And I'm like, no, I don't have that data. I can give you the big broad strokes of data that every business in that industry will have access to and should be analyzing themselves against.
You know, Greg, you remind me of one of the things that I do for clients when they're in that growth mode where they sort of got things stabilized and they want to start to market themselves in the city. This is especially important when you want to start to attract higher level of employees, when you want people coming to you. You start to enter local contests, right? So the top 100 companies in Ohio or whatever it is. And when I help them do the application, it's self-reported. You say, our revenues are this. Our profit margin is this. And we always put 10%. That ain't their number. That's not their number. But I laugh when I see, because they usually get in that nomination list of the top 100 just by filling out the application properly. And I laugh because we put in 10% and you see everybody else on that list has said the same thing. Profit margin, 10%, 10%, 10%, 10%. Very rarely does somebody say their actual 14.5%. And I'm like, oh, they should have held that back a little bit because now they just got a big target painted on their back. But guys like you and I, we actually know the reports to go to get the real info as opposed to the self-reported stuff, which you make it look a little more vanilla. You just smooth it out so that you don't draw attention.
And this also comes into play too when we talked earlier about the exit planning. If your business is outperforming the industry, you're going to get a premium multiple. If you're underperforming the industry, you're going to get a lower multiple. So I said earlier, in general, and again, this is really broad across all construction type industries, it's on average 2.5 to 5. And some get more, some get less. Yeah. But that's a good 80-20 rule right there. Well, if you're underperforming the industry, it's going to be hard to get better than the 2.5. You may even be below it. Yeah. If you're above it and you're significantly above it, you're going to get closer to the 5, maybe even above it, because people say, you know what? I don't think I can build it as good as you did, as fast as you did to get a return. So I want to buy it from you and I'll pay more for it so I can cut my timeline to get to my profit targets.
That's right. Or like your dad's business, they want to move into a new territory. Or they've just brought on a new line of product and they have requirements from their distributor that they grow at a certain pace. So there's reasons that they have to grow. And then they can, no offense to anybody listening, but they can take out your administrative staff and replace it with their own. And so suddenly you've got the $30,000 salary here and the $30,000 salary there wiped out. The company's just made another $60,000 bottom line because they've just replaced your admin staff. There's so many. This is what we talk about. You and I talk about this kind of stuff all the time. But that's in the 3 types of buyers report. It's what's crazy is nobody talks about this. So that's why I'm glad I have you as a resource to bring onto the call, because people need this, and I don't think they get it as often. First, they wouldn't even know where to find this info.
Right.
What's this comparative report all about? And if somebody wanted to contact you and find out about it, how would they do that?
So a comparative report is just basically we take the company's information, you provide it, your financials, and we put it into the software, and it creates reports. Says, here's where your company stacks up on about 40 different metrics.
Wow.
Here's where the industry is. Here's what the difference is. And it will highlight it in red and green to make it really easy for dummies like me to say,
and me,
you're really
like
good here.
Yeah.
You're really bad here. So you can really zero in on metrics that you should maybe address and figure out why you're behind the market. If you wanted to do that analysis, you want to get that report, you can always contact me at G DeSimone, DeSimone at beaconequityadvisors.com. So that's my work email, and I process these all day long for clients, and whether they ask for it or not, if I'm bringing them to market, I'm running this report so I can figure out, am I going to get a premium value or not?
Well, Greg, I've seen these reports because you and I have worked together for a very long time on lots of deals. And one of the things I like about the report is that you mentioned the red and the green. If one component of the company comes up as red, that back part of the report says, you scored red here, this is what to do. And so it tells you, go do this, go do that, stop doing this. And it's kind of like this magic rule book, right? It's just a set of, here's what to do. Okay, that's what we go do. And, over the years, you and I learned that intuitively because we've gone through these hundreds of times. Right. But for other people who may not have had a chance to see it or even known this exists, man, it's a playbook. Yeah. It's what it is.
Those tips and recommendations to close those gaps are great. And it's, again, there are some people, I hate saying, there are some people who don't want to pay to get the professional advice. This is at least a shortcut to say, here's where my gap is. Here's some things I can do. And if you could do it on your own, all the power to you, do it. Better if you could actually take a professional, someone who's done it before, and say, okay, here are the 15 recommendations. These 3 recommendations are going to have the biggest impact, which will, again, I'm a big fan of. You can get there, and most people, if you really put enough effort into it and work hard, you'll get there. But when you want to get there faster, why would you highlight the things that are going to have the biggest impact quicker?
Yeah, instead of chasing a straw pony that's not going to get you anywhere, go for the meat. And not everything is as cut and dry as you think, because there are little wrinkles inside of things. For instance, the most important thing might seem like the most obvious thing to go after, but you really need to fix something else before you do that. Because otherwise you won't be able to get the most out of that. Exactly. Big flashing light that you see. You think, oh, it's my margins, it's my margins, it's my margins. But you have to go back and fix something else before you can fix your margins.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Greg, thanks so much. This has been one of the longest interviews we've done. That's because I made you do a bunch of definitions. So again, your email, your name is Greg DeSimone. And so your email, why don't you say your email again so people listening can grab it?
It's G DeSimone at Beacon Equity Advisors. So it's DeSimone. That's how you spell my name. G DeSimone at Beacon Equity Advisors.
Perfect. Now, for those of you listening, you know that this is also on YouTube, and on the homepage for Profit Tool Belt, Greg's interview will be there. So if you need to contact him, his link will be there, or just contact me and I'll put you in touch with Greg. Greg and I know each other very, very well. Greg, thanks for being on the show. It's been a big one. I bet you there's a lot of people out there shaking their head, learning things they probably never heard before.
Well, if we can help them run their business better and avoid some mistakes, all the better. That's why we do what we do.
Yeah. Hey, man, I'm so glad I have you as a resource to call on. I hope we can have you back on the show in the future.
Would love to. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.